Chapter 3. I heard the first human birth before I saw it. Eve's cries carried across the land east of Eden, sounds I'd never heard before. Pain and effort and something else underneath it all. Determination, maybe, or hope. I wasn't supposed to leave my post. The flaming sword still moved beside me, guarding the way to the tree of life. But I could see far enough from that elevated ground, far enough to watch the small shelter Adam had built, far enough to see him pacing outside while Eve labored within. The curse had said pain in childbirth. This was the first time I understood what that meant. When the baby's cry finally came, thin and sharp against the evening air, Adam stopped pacing. He stood completely still, staring at the doorway. Then he rushed inside. I couldn't hear what they said to each other. But I saw them emerge later, Eve leaning on Adam, both of them looking down at the small bundle in her arms. Their faces had something I hadn't seen since the garden. Not joy, exactly. Not the pure delight of those first days. But close to it. A fragile version of what they'd lost. "I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord," Eve said. Her voice carried on the wind, and I felt something loosen in my chest. She still acknowledged him. After everything, she still gave credit to God. They named him Cain. I watched him grow. Time moved differently now that there was death in the world. Days had weight they hadn't carried before. I saw Adam teaching Cain to work the ground, showing him how to coax food from soil that resisted. The thorns and thistles were real. I watched Adam's back bend under the labor, watched sweat pour down his face, watched Cain learn that everything came harder now. When the second son came, Eve named him Abel. I don't know what she saw in him that made her choose that name. It means breath, or vapor, something that doesn't last. Maybe she already knew something was wrong. The boys grew so differently. Cain took to the ground like his father, planting and tending and harvesting. He had Adam's intensity, that focused determination. But there was something harder in Cain's face. Something that watched and calculated. Abel kept the flocks. He moved among his sheep with a gentleness that reminded me of how God had handled Adam in those first moments. Patient, attentive, like every animal mattered to him individually. I found myself hoping. Standing at my post, watching the flaming sword move in its endless pattern, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe sin wouldn't spread. Maybe the choice in the garden was a single terrible moment, not a pattern. Maybe these children would choose differently. Hazel found me one evening, his expression grim. "They've been circling," he said. I didn't need to ask who. The fallen had grown bolder since the exile. They couldn't enter the garden itself, not with the cherubim stationed there, but they prowled the edges, testing, watching. "Near the humans?" I asked. "Near Cain especially." Hazel's jaw tightened. "I've driven 3 of them back this week alone. They keep coming." I looked toward the settlement where smoke rose from Adam's shelter. "What do they want with him?" "What do they ever want?" Hazel said. "To prove God wrong. To show that his image bearers are no better than dust." I thought about that for a long time after Hazel left. The fallen hated humans with a particular bitterness. They'd rebelled against God and been cast out, but they might have accepted that defeat if it hadn't been for humanity. The idea that God would love these fragile dirt creatures, would walk with them, would give them dominion. That was what they couldn't stomach. So they worked to corrupt them. To prove that humans didn't deserve God's love. And maybe, standing there at the edge of paradise, watching smoke rise from the first human home, I should have realized what was coming. But I didn't. I kept hoping. The day of the offerings started like any other. I'd been reassigned by then. Not officially, but the eastern gate didn't need constant guarding anymore. Adam and Eve weren't trying to return. They'd built their lies outside, and their children had never known anything else. So I spent more time patrolling the wider territory, watching over the family from a distance. That morning I saw both brothers preparing something. Cain gathered produce from his fields, grain and vegetables, the fruit of his labor. Abel selected a lamb from his flock, one of the firstborn, fat and healthy. They walked separately toward the place where Adam had taught them to bring offerings to God. I followed. The place wasn't special, just a raised area with stones Adam had arranged. But this was where they came to worship, to remember, to acknowledge the God they couldn't see the way their parents once had. Cain arrived first. He arranged his offering carefully on the stones, grain stacked neatly, vegetables displayed. He stepped back and waited. Abel came next. He didn't just lay his lamb down. He killed it. I watched the knife flash, watched the blood spill over the stones, watched Abel's face as he performed the sacrifice. There was something in his expression. Sorrow, maybe. Recognition of what the offering cost. Then I felt God's presence. Not walking among them like he'd walked with Adam and Eve. Different now, more distant but still unmistakably there. I could feel him considering the offerings, and I watched to see what he would do. He looked on Abel's offering with favor. I saw it in the way the air changed around Abel, the way light seemed to settle on him for a moment. God accepted what Abel brought, received it, was pleased. Then God looked at Cain's offering. Nothing happened. No acknowledgement. No favor. The air didn't change. The light didn't settle. Cain waited. I watched him stand there, eyes lifted, expecting something. The same posture Abel had held moments before. But nothing came. The silence stretched, and I saw the moment he understood it wasn't going to. His face transformed. Anger. Dark and immediate, and shocking in its intensity. His jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists. He stared at Abel's bloody stones, at Abel's accepted sacrifice, and something twisted in his expression. I moved closer, though I wasn't supposed to. I needed to understand what I was seeing. Why had God rejected Cain's offering? The produce was good. I'd watched Cain work the ground, knew how much effort those crops represented. What was different about Abel's sacrifice? The blood, I thought, the death. Abel had brought something that cost him, that required killing. Cain had brought what he'd grown. But was that really the difference? I didn't know. I still don't know the whole of it, but I saw what happened next. Why are you angry? God's voice came to Cain directly, and Cain flinched. Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? God's voice was patient, even now. But if you don't do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Sin is crouching at your door. I looked around then, really looked, the way I should have been looking all along. And I saw them. Shadows at the edges of my vision, fallen angels circling, whispering, pressing in. They'd been there all along, I realized, watching, waiting, feeding Cain's anger with their poison. Sin is crouching at your door. God had warned him. Directly, clearly, with compassion in his voice. He'd told Cain what was happening and what to do about it. Cain said nothing. Cain turned and walked away from the offering place, past his brother toward the fields. Abel watched him go, then gathered what remained of his sacrifice and followed. I should have done something. I wanted to do something. I could feel the fallen pressing in around Cain, could sense them whispering their lies. But what could I do? I could fight them, yes, drive them back, create distance. But I couldn't make Cain's choice for him. God had said it himself. Sin was crouching. Cain had to rule over it. He had to choose. Days passed. I fought 3 skirmishes that week, driving back fallen angels who got too close to the brothers. Each time they retreated, laughing. Each time they came back. They know something's coming, Hazel said. He was wounded from a fight 2 nights before, a gash along his arm that would take time to heal. They're not just testing anymore, they're waiting. For what? I asked. Hazel didn't answer. But his eyes moved toward where Cain worked alone in his fields, and I understood. The fallen were patient. They'd planted seeds in Cain's heart. Now they waited for the harvest. The day it happened was quiet. Too quiet. I was patrolling the eastern boundary when I noticed both brothers walking toward the fields. Together this time. Cain had said something to Abel, invited him out to where the crops grew. Something felt wrong. The air had that heaviness I'd learned to recognize, that pressure that meant spiritual forces were gathering. I moved closer, trying to see what was happening. They stood among the grain, talking. I couldn't hear the words. Abel's posture was relaxed, open. He had no idea what was coming. Cain's hands were at his sides, clenched. I saw the fallen angels first. Dozens of them, ringing the field, pressing in with their whispers. I drew my blade and cut toward them, trying to create space, trying to push them back before they pushed Cain over the edge. One of them laughed in my face. Too late, he said. Nothing else. Just that and the laughter. I drove him back anyway, drove 3 more back. Fought my way toward the brothers, not knowing what I could do when I reached them, only knowing I had to try. And then I heard it. A sound I'd never heard before. Heavy and wet and final. A body hitting the ground. I stopped fighting. The fallen stopped too, every one of them frozen, watching. Cain stood over his brother. His hands were red. His face was blank, empty, like something had drained out of him in the moment of the act. Abel lay in the grain, blood pooling beneath him, spreading into the earth. I wanted to scream, to shake Cain, to undo what had been done. But I could only stand there, watching the first murder in human history, watching sin multiply from disobedience to violence, from eating forbidden fruit to spilling innocent blood. The ground drank Abel's blood, and then, impossibly, it rejected it. I saw the soil recoil the way it had done in the garden when Adam and Eve's shame first took root. The earth didn't want this offering. This blood wasn't sacrifice. This was murder. The fallen angels began to laugh. One by one, they drifted away, their work complete. They'd proven their point. God's precious image-bearer, his beloved creation, had killed his own brother. Whatever Lucifer had claimed, whatever accusations he'd made against humanity, here was the evidence. We could have told you, their laughter said. We could have told you what they'd become. I stood in that field long after they left, watching Cain walk away from his brother's body, watching the blood seep into ground that didn't want it. Then I felt God coming, not like the offerings. This time he came himself, the way he'd come to Adam and Eve after they ate the fruit. The way he always came when his children needed confronting. Where is your brother Abel? God's voice rolled across the field. Cain stopped walking, didn't turn around. Just stood there with his back to his brother's body, blood still wet on his hands. I don't know, Cain said. Am I my brother's keeper? The lie hit me like a physical blow. Not the hiding Adam and Eve had done. Not the blame shifting and excuse making. This was defiance. Cain knew exactly where his brother was. He knew what he'd done. And he looked God in the face and lied about it. Am I my brother's keeper? Like it wasn't his responsibility. Like the answer was supposed to be no. What have you done? God said, and his voice had that same grief I'd heard in the garden. Deeper, maybe. Heavier. Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. The blood cries out. I heard it too then. Not a voice exactly, but a pressure, a wrongness, the universe itself rejecting what had happened here. Now you are under a curse. God continued, and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Cain finally turned around. His face had changed again. Not the blank emptiness from before. Now there was fear. My punishment is more than I can bear, Cain said. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. I waited for God to say yes. To say this was justice, to end the murderer the way the murderer had ended his brother. But God didn't say that. Not so, God said. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over. And then God marked him. I watched it happen. A sign placed on Cain visible to any who might encounter him, marking him as protected. The murderer, the liar, the defiant one who had killed his brother and lied about it to God's face. Marked for protection. I didn't understand. I don't think I was meant to. Hazel found me after Cain walked east, toward the land that would be called Nod. I was standing over Abel's body, though by then others had come. Adam and Eve weeping over their son. The first human death, and it had come at a brother's hand. This is justice? Hazel said. His voice was tight, controlled. He killed his brother and gets a mark of protection? I know, I said. The fallen are celebrating. Do you know what they're saying? They're saying God's mercy makes him weak, that he loves these creatures too much to do what's necessary. I know, I said again, then explain it to me. Hazel turned to face me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not doubt exactly, but frustration so deep it approached despair. Explain how this is right. Explain how protecting a murderer serves God's purpose. I looked at Abel's body, at Adam holding Eve while she sobbed, at the blood still darkening the ground. I can't, I said. We stood there in silence. I thought about the promise God had made in the garden, the seed of the woman crushing the serpent's head. Something was supposed to come through Eve, through her offspring. Some future victory I couldn't see yet. With Abel dead and Cain exiled, that promise seemed further away than ever. But God had protected Cain. Even after everything, he'd marked him for protection. Why? What did God see that I couldn't? Maybe. I started, then stopped. Maybe what? Hazel asked. Maybe mercy isn't weakness, I said slowly, working it out as I spoke. Maybe it costs something to protect when you want to punish. I looked at the blood still darkening the ground. God's love for them isn't blindness. It's just bigger than what I can see. Hazel was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. That's not an answer, he said. No, I agreed. It's not. But it was all I had. Eve bore another son. She named him Seth, which means appointed. Appointed to replace Abel, to continue what had been broken. The first real proof that God's plan wasn't over, even after everything that had happened. I watched Seth grow, and I watched Cain's line spread in the land of Nod. They built cities, developed tools, created music and metalwork. Human brilliance unfolding even in exile, even under the curse. But the violence spread too. Cain's descendant Lamech boasted of killing a man for wounding him. The pattern Cain had established was becoming culture. Murder wasn't a singular horror anymore. It was a precedent. I kept my post. Kept fighting the fallen when they came. Kept watching humanity stumble forward through a world that had grown thorns. And I kept thinking about the blood. Abel's blood, crying from the ground. The first innocent blood demanding justice. God had heard it. God had responded. But he hadn't ended Cain. He'd protected him instead. All I knew was that sin had spread. From the garden to the next generation. From disobedience to murder. From 2 people to an entire line. And God was still working, still loving them, still protecting even the ones who defied him. But the blood stayed with me, Abel's blood on the ground, the lamb's blood on the stones. Something connected them, something I couldn't name yet. I had the feeling I'd see more blood before I understood any of it.
Chapter Guild, Stories for Your Mind.